Joe, a big game in Oregon yesterday as Oregon took on USC and was able to prevail. Joe, when we recap this game, what are your thoughts?
Blake, one of the biggest narratives that we had on the show, that nationally a lot of big shows had, and then also people from other fan bases when talking about Oregon, it was that they weren't being tested. They had a schedule up until this point that they weren't challenged by a legitimate threat. Iowa was a nice little test, and it provided them with a chance to prove themselves in a difficult road environment, in the rain, needing to lean on their run game, and they passed that test. USC, and I still stand by this even though they lost by multiple scores, was a legitimate quality opponent. A team that very well, if they were firing on all cylinders, could have beaten them, gone to the college football playoff. But like, they stepped up and they completely knocked USC on their ass. Mm-hmm. A team that showed that they were capable of being physical. Oregon out-physicaled them. They ran the ball very consistently. They made a lot of big plays when they needed to. And this is the thing that was the most impressive to me, Blake, for Oregon. They were incredibly banged up and hobbled coming into this.
Yeah.
Offensive line injuries, Dante Moore.
Right.
Yeah, you're dealing with all that, Blake. And to have played that, to have won so confidently, to look as well-rounded and consistent and as solid despite that, really plays to what we've talked about with Dan Lanning. He's recruited well. He's developed the foundation of this roster. They've got really underrated depth. And Blake, I think that this is one of those games that really solidifies that Oregon is more of a threat than we were giving them credit for.
Well, look, and I thought during the game that it could have been a bigger separation between Oregon and USC for what it's worth if they wouldn't have had 130 yards worth of penalties. Joe, 130 yards worth of penalties could have really separated. Now, USC didn't play clean either. They had over 100 yards of penalties. But I thought the 42-27, it already looks dominating because it is. The truth of the matter was, I kept feeling like, damn, man, Oregon just kind of keep shooting themselves in the foot, and why that game was so tight throughout in certain situations. You know, you got multiple situations. I think with the last one, if I'm not mistaken, it was you're tied at half, and then you're tied going into the fourth quarter in a lot of no, you're not tied at half. You're up a couple of scores at half, but then you start trading some things. You get down one score. You get down to a situation where you get to the third quarter, and it's 28-21, okay? And you got to go get a touchdown, which they did. But it just felt like to me that even though it's 42-27, it could have been a lot worse if those penalties coming out of Austin for Oregon at home would have gotten cleaned up. But I gotta be blunt with you. Look, there were some bad plays from Oregon, you know, like the interception. I talked about the third quarter, the interception. But when they needed a drive, Joe, the 7-play, 75-yard drive, they had a 13-yard run, a 5-yard run, an 11-yard run, multiple 5-yard runs to get into the end zone, then a 28-yard touchdown pass to Sadiq where he fell on his head, and I thought he broke his neck. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting here like, that dude might be the best player in the draft. Like, it's
he's
good he is. Jesus, my God. He's just so good. But, Joe, you brought up the biggest piece here. People look at USC and say to themselves, they're probably going to be a 9-3 team. They don't have the level of physicality. That was a really physical run game that we've seen from them this year. And, Joe, they only had 58 yards rushing. 53 yards rushing, They had 1.9 yards per rush. 52. 28 carries on 52 yards, 1.9 yards per rush. Now, Maeva, I thought, look, they had some bad plays. They were banged up too. USC had to get a new center in. The bad snap when they're going in to tie the game. A lot of bad situations again for USC on the road, but it was what you and I talked about in the preview. Could USC play clean football on the road to beat their biggest challenger this season? And they couldn't. The bad snap. Then after the bad snap, Maeva throws a horrible interception. He had 2 on the day. I thought the game was a lot more lopsided in Oregon's favor than what the final score even indicates, even though it does look bad. That was an ass whooping if Oregon doesn't have 130 yards in penalties is insane. It is insane. One got picked up, by the way, in the fourth quarter and got waved off. It was a 15-yard face mask. And I'm like, dude, they almost had 150 yards worth of penalties. And I'm just like, okay. I mean, it was a pure ass whooping up front against a very physical unit in USC that's been running the ball on everybody in the Big Ten.
I also, one thing, and we've mentioned this before when we've talked about Oregon, I freaking love the running back room that they have. I mean, I don't think that there's another team in the country that has a 3 deep. We've got these teams that got good dual running back rotations, like Georgia's Nate Frazier and Chauncey Bones is tremendous, and Notre Dame's Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love is tremendous. But you were talking about Noah Whittington, who's taken over as this lead running back, who's just consistent for a bucket every single time you call on him. Jordan Davison has done a tremendous job of being the second guy in the rotation. And then Dyer Hill Jr. has been a spark plug for a million big plays.
I'm sorry, but he needs more touches.
I think he's going to eventually really, really turn out to be, in like the next couple of years, just to be a complete total star. I think that he is going to be one of those dudes that has that in him. The thing too, by the way, the build and the makeup of this room, though, to have Whittington, who's the more compact, shiftier guy, to have the dump truck 230-pounder in Davison, and then have the speedster in Hill. I think it's just such tremendous creativity and understanding of how do we set up our offense to succeed. We've got 3 guys that do 3 different things, and we know how to deploy them and completely screw up everybody that we're facing.
And by the way, Hughes hit the portal, who was supposed to be your lead back on the year.
Well, we wonder, see, people were talking about, like, man, that's so messed up. Hughes, he's like, it's such an issue that he entered the transfer portal. He's a bust. That had nothing to do with him. This is a really damn good running back room. I don't think that he knew, or even the Oregon expected, that they were going to be able to get this much out of these guys.
They physically lean. And listen, I do think for Oregon moving forward, that offensive line's got to get healthy quickly, very quickly. Yeah. Can't have 3 guys out. But, man, they leaned on them. And that defensive line came to play. And to be real with you, this was the game that I think we always were looking for Oregon, as you alluded to in the open there. You go into double overtime with Penn State, you lose to Indiana, and everybody's like, yeah, what is Oregon? Okay, you came out clean versus Iowa in the monsoon. Who is Oregon? Brother, I don't care that was an ass whooping. That was a pure blown ass whooping. Now, the only thing I'd say, you got a lot of teams that you're going to face in a playoff, depending on where you're seeding. Joe, this is the second time a wide receiver room went off on their ass. It's the second time now. And I look at situations like, if you have a situation where you go up against Ohio State, you go up against A&M, God forbid Alabama comes out the slump that they're in, if they do at all. You got some rooms, man, with some really good weapons. Now, I don't know if they're I don't know where you would categorize and rank necessarily, like USC versus all these teams that will be in the playoff. But I like Craver and Concepcion. Clearly, I love what Ohio State has at receiver. I mean, there are a lot of really good teams, man. Your secondary is going to have to step up here. I mean, it's the second time when you faced a real passing attack where there were moments and times that you were getting obliterated. If Maava was a little bit more accurate and made better decisions, Joe Lemon was open on that drag route where he threw a pick. And I don't know if he doesn't go for 6. Like, I'm not trying to poo-poo on Maava here. Joe, that deep drag he missed for the pick was, oh, man, that was awful. So, again, you had a lot of PIs against Indiana, but they physically kind of look like, when you go back and just watch the game, that they physically dominated you on the boundary. These young corners and these safeties better pick it up here. They better pick it up. And listen, I could make the argument, too, in the second half versus Penn State, you got lost. You get into the playoff, you better start figuring this thing out, man. Now, again, are you going to face a room better than USC? I don't know about better, unless it's Ohio State. But you get up against A&M. You get up against a Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard. There's a lot of teams that can do a lot of really big things through the air that you better start being prepared for.
I think Alabama and Ohio State are the only 2 teams that are equal or better than USC on on offense in terms of being able to throw the ball.
You wouldn't put Concepcion and Craver up there? Because I would.
I would, but here's the thing, though. Marcel Reed, as great as he's been, has been interception prone. And I would argue if they get Jaden Maeva to turn the ball over the way that he did in this game, I think that they could entice Marcel Reed.
They also scored 28 points in 5 minutes.
Yes.
I mean,
and it's no knock on Texas A&M. It's just more so if I think that Oregon's secondary plays well when they're going up against quarterbacks who actually, let me reframe that. To give Oregon secondary credit, they have been good at forcing turnovers when they've needed it the most. They forced a pick on against Indiana to keep them in the game when their offense wasn't doing very well. And in this game, they have 2 big interceptions that made the plays when they needed to. I think that you're making a really good point of they do have to be more consistent. They can't give up big plays the way that they do. Tinook Hines completely popped off and he played really well. Mekhi Lemon was bottled up, but I think teams have been going by this approach that have better bodies to cover this USC receiver room of saying, like, let's let these other guys go off and we're going to slow down Mekhi Lemon. Lo and behold, that leads to Mekhi Lemon throwing a touchdown pass, which was completely bonkers.
Which, by the way, the kid 16, what was his name again?
Tinook Hines.
I mean, with all due respect, the catch that Mekhi Lemon threw was ridiculous. Joe, I'm not going to lie to you. Oregon's secondary got big-bodied twice. That's twice now. I'm going to just I
don't disagree. It's not perfect. I don't disagree with you.
They got big body. You know when you're playing pickup basketball and the big guy's always underneath the rim and he's throwing them wide-ass hips at you? They got big-bodied.
Well, Jacoby Lane is a basketball player, so I think
big-backed. I'm talking about Big Bertha'd. They got pushed around when they had no business being pushed around.
That's fair.
By the way, I gotta be blunt with you. Thieneman, we talked a lot about him now. All right. You missing some coverages, big dog. When I come in here and turn the projector on and I turn on that inside copy and you look lost in space, you better pick it up.
I don't have enough context to counter that. I didn't watch him that closely. So I don't
drag. Giving the help along the sidelines. Don't run down to Mekhi Lemon. I mean, you got to be where you need to be, man. Instinctually, he's one of the best. But sometimes when he misses, those are big misses. They're big misses. So, again, love the physicality, but my God, you got to get better there. All right.